I was celebrating. The humans had finally done what we had all secretly hoped for since their irritating species first stumbled into our pristine corner of the galaxy. They left no dramatic speeches, no threats, no demands for compensation. They simply vanished. Gone were their ridiculous warships with names like Hammer of Justice and Death's Shadow. Gone were their overly emotional diplomats who insisted on shaking hands instead of proper ceremonial bowing. Gone were their insane military tactics that made absolutely no sense to any rational species in the known universe. Good riddance. I had told myself that morning, adjusting my ceremonial robes as I prepared for what I thought would be the most peaceful council session in decades. How magnificently wrong I was. The first sign that something had gone catastrophically sideways came during my morning briefing. Lieutenant Zek-4 burst through my office doors without proper announcement. His blue scales flushed deep purple with panic. "Sir, we have a problem," Zek-4 gasped, his breathing apparatus clicking rapidly. I set down my morning nutrition pod with deliberate calm. "Lieutenant, the humans are gone. What possible problem could we have now?" "The Devourers, sir. They are moving." The nutrition pod slipped from my claws and splattered across my desk. The Devourers. The nightmare species from the galactic rim that had been dormant for over 200 cycles. The same species that had required the combined might of 17 different civilizations to barely contain the last time they stirred. "Moving where?" I asked, though my stomachs were already churning with the answer. "Everywhere, sir. 17 different systems have gone dark in the past 6 hours. They are not responding to any communications." I stood slowly, my mind racing through tactical possibilities. Without the humans, we had the Thek Empire's Crystal Warriors, the Moran Federation's plasma artillery, and the Zelen Republic's shield generators. Surely that would be enough. Alert all member fleets. Full mobilization. We will crush these parasites before they can establish a foothold. Zek-4's scales went from purple to white. "Sir, there is more. The Thek Empire has already engaged the enemy at the Proxima 7 system. And? Complete annihilation, sir. 12 crystal warships reduced to dust in less than 4 minutes. My legs gave out. I found myself sitting heavily in my command chair, staring at reports that made no sense. The Thek Crystal Warriors were supposed to be indestructible. Their ships could withstand direct hits from stellar-class weapons. "How?" I whispered. "The Devourers have evolved, sir. They are no longer the mindless swarm we faced 2 centuries ago. They have technology now. Weapons we cannot identify. Tactics that—" Zek-4 paused, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "Tactics that look almost human." The irony hit me like a plasma cannon to the face. For cycles we had mocked human military doctrine. They fought like maniacs, throwing themselves into impossible situations with reckless abandon. They used something they called creative chaos. Instead of proper battle formations, they made decisions based on instinct rather than logical calculation. We called them barbaric, uncivilized, dangerous. Turns out we were right about the dangerous part. Get me the emergency council session. Now. The council chamber was in chaos when I arrived. Representatives from 12 species were shouting over each other in a cacophony of languages and panic. At the center of it all sat High Chancellor Mex Prime. Her usual calm demeanor cracked like a broken shield generator. "Order! Order!" she called, her voice barely audible over the din. I strode to the center of the chamber, my military rank allowing me to bypass the usual protocols. "Honored representatives, we face extinction." The chamber fell silent. In the past 8 hours, 23 systems have fallen to the Devourers. Our preliminary response fleets have been obliterated. The enemy moves with a coordination and tactical sophistication we have never seen before. Ambassador Turn 6 from the Zelen Republic stood, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "Surely our combined fleets can stop them. We have thousands of ships, millions of warriors." "The Thek Empire thought the same thing," I replied coldly. "Their elite crystal squadron lasted 4 minutes. Then what do you suggest?" demanded General Cox II from the Moran Federation. "We cannot simply surrender." I took a deep breath, tasting the bitter reality of our situation. We need the humans. The chamber erupted again. Voices rose in outrage, disbelief, and desperate denial. "Impossible," shouted Ambassador Turn 6. "They are gone. We have no way to contact them." "Even if we could," added General Cox II, "why would they return to help us? We spent decades treating them as inferior savages." High Chancellor Mex Prime raised her hand for silence. "Advisor Korath, explain your reasoning." I activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Admiral. Battle footage from the Proxima 7 engagement filled the air. "Watch carefully. Notice how the Devourers coordinate their attacks. See how they adapt to our defensive patterns in real time. This is not mindless swarm behavior." The footage showed crystal warriors firing their signature rainbow beams at approaching Devourer ships. The energy weapons struck their targets but simply dissipated, as if the enemy had somehow learned to neutralize them. "They studied us," I continued. "For 200 cycles they watched our military exercises, analyzed our tactics, learned our weaknesses. Every formation we use, every weapon we deploy, every strategy we employ, they have a counter for it. Then we develop new tactics." General Cox II slammed his massive fist on his podium. "With what time? They are advancing at a rate of 3 systems per hour. At this pace they will reach the core worlds within 2 cycles." Ambassador Turn 6's tentacles had gone pale. "But surely there must be something we can do. Some weakness we can exploit." I manipulated the holographic display, showing tactical readouts from multiple battles. "There is." The humans are gone," shouted someone from the back of the chamber. "But their tactics are not," I roared back. "The Devourers spent 2 centuries learning to counter rational, logical military doctrine. They can predict our every move because we are predictable. We follow established patterns, proven strategies, sensible formations." I paused, letting the weight of my next words settle over the chamber. "Humans never did any of that." The silence stretched like a taut wire. "They fought with what they called organized chaos. They made tactically unsound decisions that somehow led to victory. They used weapons in ways that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They were unpredictable, irrational, and absolutely terrifying to face in battle." High Chancellor Mex Prime leaned forward. "You believe their unconventional methods could succeed where our proven tactics have failed?" "I know they could. The question is whether we can find them in time." General Cox II stood again, his massive frame imposing even among the diverse assembly. "Assuming we could locate the human fleet, what makes you think they would help us?" We made it clear they were not welcome in civilized galactic society. That was the question I had been dreading. The humans had endured decades of condescension, discrimination, and outright hostility from the Council. We had blocked their expansion into prime systems, denied them access to advanced technologies, and generally treated them like unwanted relatives at a family gathering. "Because," I said slowly, "despite all our failings toward them, humans have one characteristic that might save us all. Which is, they are incapable of ignoring a fight." The chamber buzzed with confused murmurs. In all our interactions with humanity, one pattern remained constant. No matter how outmatched, outgunned, or outnumbered they were, they never retreated from a battle they believed was worth fighting. They called it stubbornness. We called it stupidity. I manipulated the display again, showing historical footage of human military engagements. "Remember the Battle of Titan 7, 50 human ships against 300 pirate coalition vessels. Any rational species would have withdrawn. The humans attacked. They lost that battle," pointed out Ambassador Turn 6. "They lost the battle, but they destroyed 2/3 of the pirate fleet in the process. The coalition never recovered. That is how humans fight. They do not calculate odds or minimize losses. They maximize damage to the enemy, regardless of cost to themselves." High Chancellor Mex Prime was quiet for a long moment. "Even if your assessment is correct, we still face the fundamental problem. We have no idea where the humans went or how to contact them." "Actually," came a new voice from the chamber entrance, "we might." All heads turned to see Intelligence Director Renate approaching. her usually pristine uniform stained with what looked like engine lubricants. "Director Renate," the Chancellor acknowledged. "You have information?" "I have been analyzing the humans' departure pattern. They did not simply vanish. They followed a very specific trajectory when they left Council space." She activated her own holographic display, showing stellar navigation charts. Every human ship, every colony transport, every military vessel, they all departed along vectors pointing toward the same general region of space. "Where?" I asked. "The Unmarked Zone." A collective shiver ran through the chamber. The Unmarked Zone was a region of space so hostile and unpredictable that no species had ever successfully established a permanent presence there. It was filled with unstable stars, gravitational anomalies, and spatial distortions that made navigation nearly impossible. "That is madness," breathed General Cox II. "No one can survive in the Unmarked Zone." "No one rational," I corrected. "But we are talking about humans." Director Renanath nodded grimly. "My analysis suggests they did not flee randomly. They went to the one place they knew we would never follow them. Because it is certain death," protested Ambassador Turn 6. "For us, yes. But humans have a talent for surviving in environments that kill other species. Remember, they evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. Predators, weather, diseases, even their own atmosphere was toxic to most galactic species." High Chancellor Mex Prime stood slowly. "How long would it take to reach the Unmarked Zone?" "With our fastest ships, assuming we could navigate the hazards, perhaps 8 cycles," Director Renate replied. "We do not have 8 cycles. The Devourers will reach the core worlds in 2. I felt the weight of our situation settling over the chamber like a burial shroud. We were trapped between an advancing enemy we could not defeat, and allies we had driven away to a place we could not reach. "Wait," I said suddenly. "There might be another way." All eyes turned to me. "What if we do not go to them? What if we bring them to us?" "Explain," demanded the Chancellor. "The humans left, but they did not sever all ties. They still have monitoring stations scattered throughout Council space. Automated facilities that send data back to wherever they went." Director Renate's eyes widened. "The listening posts." "Of course! They maintained 17 different intelligence-gathering stations even after their official departure. Can we access them?" "Theoretically, yes. But we would need to break human encryption, which has proven challenging." I smiled grimly. "Then we do not break it. We simply make sure our message is impossible to ignore." "What kind of message?" asked General Cox II. "We show them what happens when the galaxy burns without human intervention." The plan was desperate, dangerous, and probably suicidal. In other words, it was exactly the kind of plan humans would appreciate. We would deliberately engage the Devourers at the Battle of Kepler Prime, the largest military installation in Council space. We would fight with everything we had, knowing we would lose, but we would make sure every human monitoring station in the galaxy recorded our destruction. If I was right about human nature, they would not be able to resist responding to a challenge of that magnitude. If I was wrong, we would all be dead within 2 cycles anyway. "Honored representatives," I announced to the chamber, "I recommend we prepare for the most important military engagement in galactic history. Not because we can win, but because our defeat might be the only thing that brings our salvation home." The vote was unanimous. As the council session ended and representatives hurried away to mobilize their fleets, I remained in the chamber staring at the holographic display showing Devourer advancement patterns. Having second thoughts, High Chancellor Mex Prime had lingered behind. "Many," I admitted, "but the alternative is extinction. Do you really believe the humans will come?" I thought about that question for a long moment. "Chancellor, in all my years of military service, I have learned one fundamental truth about humans. They are utterly, completely, magnificently insane. They make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. They take on impossible odds for reasons that make no sense to rational beings." That does not sound reassuring. It should, because right now we need someone insane enough to fight an unwinnable battle against an unstoppable enemy. We need someone who looks at certain death and says, "Challenge accepted." I turned off the holographic display and headed toward the exit. "Where are you going?" the Chancellor called. To prepare for the greatest military disaster in galactic history. And to pray that somewhere in the Unmarked Zone, a bunch of crazy humans are watching our monitoring stations and getting very, very angry. As I walked through the corridors of the council building, I passed windows showing the night sky. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were advancing, consuming system after system with methodical efficiency. And somewhere else out there, in a region of space, so dangerous that only madmen would call it home, the one species crazy enough to save us all was hopefully paying attention. The Battle of Kepler Prime would begin in 18 hours. I just hoped it would not be the last battle any of us ever fought. 17 hours and 43 minutes until the Battle of Kepler Prime, and I was already watching my career die a spectacular death. You want us to do what? Admiral Torque 7 of the Moran Federation fleet was staring at me like I had suggested we use our warships as decorative lawn ornaments. Fight badly, I repeated, trying to keep the exasperation out of my voice. I need you to use every outdated, predictable, by-the-book tactic in the manual. Make it obvious what you are planning. Telegraph your moves. Be as conventional as possible. Admiral Torque 7's massive frame shook with what I hoped was suppressed laughter rather than homicidal rage. Advisor Korath, with respect, that is the stupidest battle plan I have ever heard. Perfect. That means you understand exactly what I need you to do. The briefing room fell silent except for the low hum of the station's life support systems. Around the holographic table sat the finest military minds in the galaxy, all staring at me with expressions ranging from confusion to outright horror. General HFY from the Zealand Republic raised a tentacle. Korvath, I have to ask, have you suffered some kind of mental breakdown? Because asking us to deliberately fight like amateurs seems like something someone might do if their brain had stopped working properly. My brain is working fine, General. It is our conventional tactics that have stopped working. I activated the tactical display showing the latest reports from the front lines. In the past 12 hours, we have lost 37 more systems. Every engagement follows the same pattern. Our forces deploy in standard formations, execute textbook maneuvers, and get obliterated with clockwork precision. Captain Rex 2 from the Thek Empire Crystal Fleet leaned forward, her crystalline features refracting the holographic light into rainbow patterns. The enemy seems to know our every move before we make it. Exactly, because they studied us for 2 centuries while we ignored them. They know how rational military minds think. They can predict every logical tactical decision we might make. I manipulated the display to show battle footage from Proxima 7. Watch this engagement again. Notice how the Devourers position themselves before our ships even begin their attack runs. They are not reacting to our tactics. They are anticipating them. Admiral Torque 7 growled deep in his throat. So your solution is to fight like untrained civilians? My solution is to fight like humans. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The humans never followed our tactical doctrines, I continued. They made decisions that violated every principle of civilized warfare. And because their choices made no logical sense, they were impossible to predict or counter. I pulled up historical battle footage showing human engagements. Battle of New Terra, 15 cycles ago. Human fleet outnumbered 4-1 by pirate coalition forces. Standard doctrine calls for defensive positioning and coordinated fire patterns. Instead, the humans split their fleet into 3 groups and attacked from completely different directions simultaneously. That is tactically insane, muttered General Wix 5. It divides your firepower and eliminates mutual support between units. It also confused the enemy so completely that they spent the first 10 minutes of the battle shooting at each other instead of the humans. By the time the pirates figured out what was happening, half their fleet was already destroyed. Captain Rex 2 studied the footage with obvious fascination. They sacrificed tactical advantage for psychological disruption. They won a battle they should have lost by doing things no rational commander would attempt. He turned to face the assembled officers. The Devourers cannot predict irrational behavior because they are fundamentally logical creatures. They have spent 2 centuries learning to counter sensible tactics. They have no preparation for dealing with complete tactical madness. Admiral Torque 7 was quiet for a long moment. Even assuming your theory is correct, How does deliberately losing at Kepler Prime help us? Because we are not just fighting the Devourers, we are sending a message to the humans. Every human monitoring station in the galaxy will record this battle. They will see us fighting with their old tactics, using their strategies, and they will understand exactly what we are asking for. And if they choose not to respond, I shrugged, a gesture I had learned from human diplomats. Then we die fighting like humans instead of dying cowering like cowards. Personally, I find that option preferable. The room fell silent again. Finally, General Wix 5 spoke up. What exactly do you need us to do? For the next 6 hours, I watched the finest military officers in the galaxy learn how to fight like maniacs. Admiral Took 7 practiced something humans called ramming speed, which involved pointing your warship directly at the enemy and accelerating until impact. This feels like elaborate suicide, he complained after his 15th simulation run. That is exactly how humans described it, I replied cheerfully. They also mentioned it was surprisingly effective at close range. Captain Rex 2 was working on strafing runs, which required flying crystal fighters through enemy formations while firing in all directions. The targeting solutions make no mathematical sense, she protested. We are wasting 60% of our ammunition. Yes, but you are also hitting targets you were not even aiming at. The humans called it spray and pray. Apparently, prayer was a significant component of their military doctrine. General Wix 5 was having the most trouble with berserk charges, which involved ordering ground forces to abandon defensive positions and run directly at enemy lines while screaming threats. My soldiers think I have lost my mind, he reported. Excellent. Terror and confusion are exactly the emotions we want to inspire, in the enemy preferably, but honestly any strong emotional response is progress. As the hours passed, I began to understand why the galactic community had found humans so disturbing. Their military tactics were not just unconventional. They were actively hostile to logic, reason, and self-preservation. Watching rational beings attempt to mimic human warfare was like watching poets try to perform surgery with explosives. It was magnificent. 8 hours before the battle, Director Rinat arrived with updates on Devourer movements. They are massing at the edge of the Kepler system, she reported. Preliminary scans show approximately 800 vessels. How many do we have? I asked. 237. The officers around the table exchanged grim looks. Even with human tactics, those odds were challenging. Any word from the monitoring stations? All 17 human outposts are active and recording. If they are paying attention, they will definitely see what happens here. Admiral Talk 7 stood slowly. Advisor Korath, I want to say something before we begin this insanity. Of course, Admiral. In 40 years of military service, I have never received orders that made less sense or seemed more likely to result in complete disaster. I waited. I also want you to know that I would rather die fighting alongside you using these ridiculous tactics than live knowing we surrendered without trying something new. Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. Thank you, Admiral. That means more than you know. 4 hours before the battle, the Devourer fleet entered the Kepler system. I watched from the command center of Kepler Prime Station as 800 enemy vessels moved through space with the coordinated precision of a predator pack. They maintained perfect formation, advanced at optimal speed, and deployed in textbook invasion patterns. They were beautiful, efficient, and absolutely terrifying. All fleet commanders, this is Advisor Korath. I broadcast on the command frequency. Remember, we are not trying to win this battle. We are trying to lose it in the most spectacularly human way possible. Confusion, chaos, and complete disregard for tactical sense are our primary objectives. Understood, came Admiral Talk 7's reply. Morin Federation fleet standing by to commit elaborate suicide. Crystal fighters ready for mathematically impossible maneuvers, reported Captain Rex 2. Ground forces prepared to abandon all defensive strategy and run screaming at the enemy, added General Wix 5. I could not help but smile. Outstanding. Begin human combat protocols on my mark. 2 hours before first contact, something unexpected happened. Advisor! Lieutenant Zek 4 burst into the command center, his scales flashing alarm colors. We are receiving a transmission. From where? Unknown origin. The signal is coming through the quantum relay network, but the source is strange. Strange how? It appears to be originating from inside the unmarked zone. My heart stopped beating for several seconds. Put it through. The command center's main screen flickered to life, showing static and interference patterns. Slowly, an image resolved. A human face appeared on the screen. Male, middle-aged, with the kind of expression that suggested he was either very amused or very angry. Possibly both. Testing. Testing. Is this thing working? The human tapped something off-screen. Okay, good. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Free Fleet. Is anyone receiving this transmission? I nearly fell out of my command chair. This is Advisor Korath Vel 9 of the Galactic Unity Council. Admiral Morrison, we need to talk. The human's expression shifted to something that looked like grim satisfaction. Yeah, I bet you do. We have been watching your little devourer problem through our monitoring stations. Looks like you folks are having some trouble with the neighborhood pests. Admiral, the situation is desperate. We have lost over 60 systems in the past 2 cycles. Our conventional tactics are completely ineffective against the enemy. Morrison nodded slowly. That is because you have been fighting like civilized beings. The Devourers spent 2 centuries learning how to kill civilized beings very efficiently. We know. That is why we are implementing human tactical doctrines for the Battle of Kepler Prime. We hope demonstrate to the enemy that conventional logic is not the only way to wage war. Something strange happened to the Admiral's face. It took me a moment to recognize the expression as surprised laughter. You are planning to fight the Devourers using human tactics? Without any humans? We understand the irony of the situation. Korath, buddy, with all due respect, you folks could not fight like humans if your lives depended on it, which ironically they do. Morrison leaned closer to the camera. Human tactics are not just about making illogical decisions. They are about making illogical decisions with absolute commitment and complete disregard for consequences. You have to believe deep in your soul that throwing yourself at impossible odds is not just necessary but fun. Fun? Humans enjoy fighting losing battles, Korath. We get excited about terrible odds. The worse the situation looks, the more enthusiastic we become. That is not something you can learn from a tactical manual. I felt my carefully constructed plan crumbling. Then what do you suggest? Morrison's smile became absolutely predatory. I suggest you hold position at Kepler Prime and try not to die for the next 6 hours. Why? Because the human free fleet is currently burning through the unmarked zone at maximum velocity. And we should arrive just in time to show you how human tactics are really supposed to work. The transmission cut out, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Did he just say? Lieutenant Sec 4 began. The humans are coming back, I finished. After everything we did to them, after driving them away, after treating them like unwanted barbarians, they are coming back to save us. How many ships do they have? Asked Director Renate. That was an excellent question. When the humans left Council space, their official fleet roster listed maybe 300 vessels. Not nearly enough to face 800 Devourer warships. I guess we will find out, I said. 1 hour before the battle, the Devourer fleet completed their deployment around Kepler Prime. They moved with mechanical precision, taking positions that would allow overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. It was a textbook siege formation, perfectly executed. They clearly expected us to respond with equally predictable defensive tactics. They were about to be very disappointed. All units, I broadcast. This is your last chance to withdraw from this insanity. Any commander who wishes to retreat may do so with no loss of honor. The communication channels remained silent for several seconds. Then Admiral Tok 7's voice crackled through the static. Advisor Korath, speaking for the Moran Federation fleet, we would like to respectfully decline your offer and instead request permission to commence the most gloriously stupid military operation in galactic history. Permission granted, Admiral. All units, begin human combat protocols. And remember, if you are not questioning your own sanity, you are probably not doing it right. The Battle of Kepler Prime began with 237 galactic warships charging directly at 800 Devourer vessels, while broadcasting what humans apparently called war cries on all frequencies. It was magnificent, terrifying, and absolutely doomed to failure. Admiral Tok 7 led the Moran Federation heavy cruisers in the first wave, their massive ships accelerating far beyond safe operational limits while firing every weapon they possessed in all directions. The targeting computers had been deliberately scrambled to prevent logical fire control solutions. Captain Rex 2 brought her crystal fighters through the enemy formation in a pattern that violated every principle of fighter tactics, splitting her squadron into individual units that attacked separate targets while screaming human battle songs at maximum volume. General Wix 5's ground assault teams launched from dropships without waiting for orbital bombardment support, landing on Devourer vessels and attempting to fight their way to engineering sections using nothing but close combat weapons and what humans called righteous fury. It was chaos. It was madness. It was the most beautiful disaster I had ever witnessed. And for the first 10 minutes, it almost worked. The Devourers, expecting logical tactical deployment, found themselves facing 237 ships behaving like rabid animals. Their perfect formation dissolved as captains tried to respond to threats that made no strategic sense. But the enemy adapted quickly. After the initial confusion wore off, superior numbers and advanced technology began to tell. Galactic ships started dying despite their unpredictable tactics. Admiral Tok 7's flagship took a direct hit that vaporized half the vessel. Captain Rex 2 lost 30% of her fighters in the first engagement wave. Advisor Lieutenant Sec 4 reported grimly, "We are losing ships faster than projected. At this rate, the fleet will be eliminated within 2 hours." I watched the tactical display with growing desperation. We had bought time and confusion, but not victory. The Devourers were learning to counter even our irrational tactics. "Where are the humans?" I muttered. As if summoned by my words, the space around Kepler Prime suddenly exploded with new contact signatures. Multiple hyperspace emergence events. Lieutenant Zek 4 shouted. Unknown vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The tactical display lit up like a festival celebration as ship after ship materialized around the battle zone. But these were not the sleek, elegant vessels of galactic civilization. These ships looked like they had been built in someone's garage by a committee of maniacs, with access to military-grade weapons and no adult supervision. "Human Free Fleet has arrived," came Admiral Morrison's voice over the communication channels. "Sorry we are late. Traffic in the Unmarked Zone was absolutely murder." "Admiral Morrison," I gasped. "How many ships do you have?" "Well, that depends on how you count. We have about 400 actual warships, maybe 600 converted freighters with military modifications, and roughly 2,000 smaller vessels that we optimistically call fighters but which are really just very angry people in very fast ships with very large guns. 3,000 ships. The humans had brought 3,000 ships. How did you build so many vessels? Director Renate asked in amazement. Build them? Oh, we did not build most of these. We stole them, salvaged them, bought them from scrap dealers, and in some cases just found them floating around the Unmarked Zone and decided they looked useful. Humans are very good at making broken things work again. On the tactical display, I watched the human fleet deploy around the battle zone. If the Galactic fleet's tactics had been chaotic, the human formation was pure insanity made manifest. Ships moved in patterns that hurt to look at, formations that changed every few seconds, and attack runs that seemed designed by someone who had never heard of physics. All human units. Admiral Morrison broadcast. You know the drill. Find something ugly and shoot it until it stops moving. Try not to hit the pretty alien ships. They are on our side. Admiral, I transmitted. The enemy has superior technology and defensive capabilities. Our weapons have been largely ineffective. Yeah, about that, Morrison replied cheerfully. The thing is, Korath, we spent the last few decades in the Unmarked Zone fighting things that make your Devourers look like harmless pets. When you live in a region of space where the stars try to eat you and the planets shoot back, you learn to build really, really mean weapons. The human fleet opened fire. What happened next was not a battle. It was an artistic masterpiece painted in explosions and set to music composed entirely of screaming enemy vessels. Human weapons were not elegant. They did not utilize refined energy matrices or sophisticated targeting algorithms. They were big, loud, and designed with the single-minded purpose of making enemy ships stop existing as quickly as possible. Devourer vessels that had shrugged off crystal energy beams and plasma artillery suddenly found themselves being hit by weapons that seemed to operate on principles of applied hatred rather than recognizable physics. "What kind of armaments are those?" Captain Rex 2 asked over the tactical channel. "We call them problem solvers," came a cheerful human voice. "Basically, we took everything we learned about making things explode and applied it to the noble art of making other people's ships explode instead." The battle turned into a rout within minutes. Devourer vessels, faced with weapons they could not analyze and tactics that violated the laws of rational thought, began to retreat. But the humans were not content with mere victory. "Admiral Morrison," I transmitted, "the enemy is withdrawing. Should we allow them to escape?" Morrison's laughter came through the speakers like rolling thunder. "Korath, my friend, there is something you need to understand about human military doctrine. We do not believe in allowing genocidal swarms to escape so they can come back later with friends." The human pursuit was comprehensive. For the next 8 hours I watched 3,000 human vessels hunt down every single Devourer ship in the system. They chased them through asteroid fields, around gas giant moons, and into the outer system where space itself seemed hostile to navigation. The humans did not care. They followed their targets into impossible conditions, through spatial anomalies that should have destroyed their ships, and across gravitational fields that made hyperspace travel mathematically impossible. When the last Devourer vessel was finally destroyed in the corona of Kepler's primary star, Admiral Morrison transmitted a message to the entire fleet. "All units, this is Admiral Morrison. Phase 1 complete. All surviving Devourer vessels in this system have been eliminated. Prepare for Phase 2. "Phase 2? I asked. "We are going to visit every system the Devourers conquered and take them all back. Then we are going to follow their trail to whatever hole they crawled out of and make sure they never bother anyone again." I stared at the tactical display showing 3,000 human ships already moving toward hyperspace jump points. "Admiral, you just fought a major battle. Do your crews not need rest? Repairs? Resupply?" "Korvath, buddy. We have been living in the Unmarked Zone for the past several years. This was not a major battle. This was a warm-up exercise." As the human fleet began jumping to hyperspace, heading for the conquered systems, Admiral Morrison's flagship remained behind. "Advisor Korath, we need to talk. In person this time. Mind if I come aboard your station?" Admiral Jake Morrison looked exactly like what I expected a human military commander to look like after spending several years fighting nightmares in the most dangerous region of space known to galactic civilization. Which is to say, he looked like he had been through a meat grinder, survived out of pure spite, and decided the experience was so much fun that he wanted to do it again. "Advisor Korath," Morrison said, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting gesture. "It is good to finally meet you in person." I clasped his hand, still amazed by the human custom of physical contact between strangers. "Admiral Morrison, I must say, your timing was impeccable." "Well, we were in the neighborhood," he grinned, showing far too many teeth. "By which I mean we have been watching your monitoring stations for months, waiting for something interesting to happen." We stood in my office aboard Kepler Prime Station, looking out through the transparent aluminum windows at the aftermath of the battle. Debris from Devourer ships drifted past like metallic snow while human salvage crews worked to recover anything useful from the wreckage. "Admiral, I have to ask, how did you manage to build such a massive fleet in just a few years?" Morrison settled into a chair that looked comically small beneath his frame. "That is a story worth telling. When we left Council space, we were angry, hurt, and honestly pretty insulted. But we were also free for the first time in decades. Free? Free to be ourselves. No more Council regulations about acceptable military doctrine. No more restrictions on weapon development. No more limits on where we could explore or what we could fight." His grin widened. "Do you have any idea how liberating it is to tell an entire species of warriors that all the rules are off?" I was beginning to understand why the galactic community had found humans so disturbing. "The Unmarked Zone turned out to be perfect for us," Morrison continued. "It is full of hostile entities, impossible conditions, and challenges that would kill any rational species. In other words, it was like a giant playground designed specifically for humans." "What kind of hostile entities?" "Oh, the usual nightmare fuel. Sentient plasma storms that hunt starships, crystalline parasites that eat metal and reproduce by infecting technology, void predators that exist partially outside normal space-time and feed on conscious thought. You know, Tuesday, I stared at him. You fought things like that for entertainment? Entertainment, training, survival, boredom relief. After a few years of that, your Devourers looked like a relaxing vacation. Morrison leaned forward. But here is the thing, Koreth. We did not just survive in the Unmarked Zone. We thrived. We learned to build ships that could function in impossible conditions. We developed weapons that work on principles the galactic community has never imagined. We became something new. What do you mean? We became the thing that monsters check under their beds for before going to sleep. The communication panel on my desk chimed. Advisor Karath, came Lieutenant Zigfor's voice. We are receiving reports from the advanced fleets. Put it through. The holographic display activated, showing Admiral Morrison second in command, a woman with scars across half her face and eyes that suggested she had seen things that should not exist. Admiral Morrison, this is Commander Lisa Park reporting from the Sigma-7 system. We have successfully eliminated all Devourer forces and are beginning restoration operations. Casualties? Morrison asked. None, sir. The enemy resistance was minimal. They seem unprepared for our weapons. Morrison nodded. Continue the advance. Next target is the Gamma-4 system. Already en route, sir. Estimated arrival in 4 hours. The transmission ended, and I looked at Morrison with amazement. Your forces are moving that quickly. Korath, you have to understand something about the human military philosophy. We do not believe in giving enemies time to regroup, reorganize, or figure out what hit them. When we attack everywhere at once with maximum aggression and absolutely no mercy. Over the next 18 hours, I watched reports flood in from across the galaxy as human fleets systematically reclaimed every system the Devourers had conquered. It was not just military efficiency. It was mathematical precision applied to the art of warfare. How are you coordinating attacks across such vast distances? I asked during one of our strategy sessions. Quantum entanglement communication networks, Morrison replied casually. We developed them after getting tired of our ships disappearing into temporal anomalies and never being heard from again. That technology is theoretical. The energy requirements alone should make it impossible. Should, would, could. Humans are not really interested in theoretical limitations. We prefer empirical testing. Morrison pulled up a tactical display showing the galactic situation. Besides, when you are fighting entities that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously, you learn to be creative with physics. The display showed a pattern emerging as human forces advanced. The Devourers were not just retreating randomly, they were falling back along specific vectors, all pointing toward a single region of space. They are going home, I realized. Exactly, and we are going to follow them. I studied the trajectory lines with growing unease. Admiral, that region is completely uncharted. We have no idea what we might find there. Probably something horrible that wants to kill us in creative ways. Should be fun. Director Renate entered the command center carrying a datapad and wearing the expression of someone who had just discovered something deeply disturbing. Advisor Korath, Admiral Morrison, we have analyzed the Devourer technology recovered from the battle. What did you find? I asked. The weapons and defensive systems are definitely Devourer in origin, but they have been modified with technology we do not recognize. The modifications appear designed specifically to counter known galactic military capabilities. Morrison leaned forward with interest. Someone has been helping them. That is our assessment. The technology integration is too sophisticated to be accidental. Someone with detailed knowledge of galactic military doctrine has been upgrading Devourer capabilities. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. Admiral, if there is another hostile species working with the Devourers, then we find them and explain in terms they will understand why that was a mistake. Morrison finished grimly. 6 hours later, the human fleet had reclaimed the last of the conquered systems and was preparing for the final phase of operations. Morrison stood before a holographic display showing the unknown region where the Devourers had retreated. All fleet commanders, he broadcast. This is Admiral Morrison. We are about to enter uncharted space. to hunt down the source of the Devourer threat. I want to be clear about our objectives. We are not going there to negotiate, study, or attempt peaceful contact. We are going there to end this threat permanently. The responses came back from hundreds of ship captains across the fleet. Human Free Fleet, ready to explore new and creative ways to solve problems. Battle Group 7 standing by to discover what happens when immovable objects meet irresistible forces. Fighter Wing 12 prepared to test the theory that everything can be destroyed if you hit it hard enough. I looked at Morrison with amazement. Your people seem remarkably enthusiastic about potentially suicidal missions. Korath, the average human considers a 50-50 chance of survival to be acceptable odds for an interesting fight. When the odds are worse than that, we get excited. The transit to the unknown region took 2 days through hyperspace. When we dropped back into normal space, what we found defied every expectation I had about the nature of the universe. What in the name of all the gods is that? I whispered. Before us hung a structure so massive that it dwarfed entire solar systems. It was clearly artificial, constructed from some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The surface was covered with geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. That, Morrison said with grim satisfaction, is what we call a target-rich environment. Admiral, came Commander Park's voice over the communication channel. We are detecting massive energy signatures from the structure. Also, we have identified the source of the unknown technology. Show me. The display zoomed in on one section of the structure, revealing docking bays filled with ships of a familiar design. Council vessels, I breathed. Those are Galactic Unity Council ships. Morrison's expression went from grim to absolutely murderous. Someone in your government has been feeding intelligence to the enemy. That is impossible. The Council would never. Korath. I am looking at the evidence. Those are definitely Council ships, integrated into what is obviously a Devourer command structure. The implications hit me like a plasma cannon blast. Someone within the Galactic government had been collaborating with the Devourers. All those defeats, all those lost systems, all those deaths, they had been orchestrated from within. Admiral, I said slowly, I request permission to accompany your forces when you assault that structure. Denied. This is going to be extremely dangerous. With respect, Admiral. This is personal now. My own government has betrayed everything I have spent my life defending. I want to look these traitors in the face when we capture them. Morrison studied me for a long moment. Can you fight? I am a military advisor. Combat training is required. Can you fight like a human? I thought about everything I had learned over the past few days. I can try. Good enough. Suit up. The assault on the Devourer command structure was everything I had expected from human military operations and absolutely nothing like any battle I had previously experienced. Human boarding parties did not establish secure perimeters or advance with careful tactical consideration. They strapped on armor that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought subtlety was a weakness, grabbed weapons that appeared to have been built from spare parts and righteous anger, and charged directly into the most heavily defended sections of the structure while screaming challenges at anyone foolish enough to oppose them. It was terrifying, magnificent, and surprisingly effective. Stick close to me, Morrison advised as our boarding party cut through a bulkhead using what humans called a breaching charge, but which was really just a controlled nuclear explosion. Things are about to get interesting. Interesting turned out to be a considerable understatement. The interior of the structure was a maze of corridors designed for creatures much larger than most galactic species. The walls were covered with the same dark metal as the exterior, and the air carried a smell that reminded me unpleasantly of decay. Motion sensors are picking up movement ahead, reported Sergeant Mike Torres, a human soldier whose armor looked like it had been through several wars and won them all. Lots of movement. Devourers? I asked. Bigger, Morrison replied. Much bigger. The corridor ahead suddenly filled with creatures that made the Devourers look like harmless pets. They stood 3 meters tall, had too many arms, and moved with a predatory grace that suggested they were very good at killing things. Contact! Sergeant Torres shouted, opening fire with a weapon that made sounds like tearing metal and produced effects that violated several laws of physics. The human boarding party responded to the ambush with what I was beginning to recognize as typical human tactical doctrine. Instead of seeking cover or attempting to establish defensive positions, they charged directly at the enemy while firing every weapon they possessed and shouting what I assumed were either battle cries or very creative profanity. The combat was brutal, chaotic, and over surprisingly quickly. "Clear," Morrison called out as the last alien predator stopped moving. "Anyone injured?" "Torres took a hit to the shoulder," reported one of the soldiers. "Just a scratch," Torres replied, examining a wound that would have hospitalized most galactic species for weeks. "Good to go, sir." We advanced deeper into the structure, fighting through increasingly desperate resistance. The Devourers had clearly not expected anyone to assault their command center directly. "Admiral," came Commander Park's voice over the communication channel, "we have reached the central command section. You need to see this." The command center was a vast chamber filled with holographic displays, control consoles, and technology that represented a fusion of Devourer engineering and galactic science. At the center of it all sat a figure I recognized with a shock of betrayal and rage. "High Chancellor Mex Prime, Koreth," she said calmly as our boarding party entered the chamber. "I was wondering when you would arrive." I stared at her in disbelief. You have been collaborating with the Devourers?" "Collaborating? No, Koreth. I have been leading them." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The highest-ranking official in the galactic government had been orchestrating the invasion of her own civilization. Why, I managed to ask. Because the galaxy needed to evolve, and evolution requires pressure. The Council had grown complacent, weak, divided. We needed a threat that would force us to become stronger. Morrison stepped forward, his weapon trained on the former Chancellor. "Lady, you just admitted to genocide. That is not evolution. That is insanity." Mex Prime smiled coldly. "Admiral Morrison, your species understands the necessity of conflict better than most. Surely you can appreciate the value of directed aggression in promoting species development." "I appreciate the value of eliminating threats to innocent people," Morrison replied. "Which is exactly what you have become." The former Chancellor activated something on her control console. Throughout the structure, alarms began blaring. "You are too late, Admiral. The real Devourer fleet is already en route to the core worlds. While you were chasing shadows, the true invasion force has been gathering in the void between galaxies. They will arrive within hours." Morrison looked at the tactical displays showing the incoming threat. Thousands of ships, all heading directly for the most heavily populated systems in the galaxy. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. 50,000 Devourer vessels, enhanced with the best technology the galactic community has to offer. Even your impressive fleet cannot stand against such numbers." I felt despair settling over me like a burial shroud. 50,000 ships. It was impossible odds, even for humans. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical data. Then, slowly, he began to smile. 50,000 ships, he repeated, all coming directly at us through predictable approach vectors. "Admiral," I asked. "Korath, remember what I told you about human military philosophy? We do not believe in defensive fighting." He activated his communication system. "All human fleet commanders, this is Admiral Morrison. We have a new mission profile. Forget about defending the core worlds. We are going to intercept the enemy fleet in deep space and destroy them before they reach inhabited systems." "Sir," came Commander Park's voice, "the odds are extremely unfavorable. 50,000 enemy vessels against 3,000 of ours. I know, is not it wonderful?" The Battle of the Void was everything the previous engagements had been, multiplied by a factor of insanity that defied mathematical description. Human tactics, when applied on the scale of multiple fleet actions across hundreds of light-years of space, became something approaching performance art. Ships appeared from hyperspace in locations that should have been impossible to navigate to, attacked targets that were supposedly out of range, and disappeared again before the enemy could respond. The humans had learned more than just how to survive in the Unmarked Zone. They had learned how to use space itself as a weapon. "How are they doing that?" I asked, watching the tactical display show human ships materializing inside enemy formations. "Micro-jumps through hyperspace," Morrison explained. "Very dangerous, very difficult, and absolutely devastating when you get it right, and when you get it wrong, Then you end up scattered across 17 dimensions and probably discover what the color purple tastes like. But that is the price of innovation. The battle raged for 8 hours across a volume of space larger than most solar systems. Human forces struck everywhere at once, using tactics that violated every principle of conventional space warfare. They attacked from impossible angles, used weapons that should not have functioned in vacuum, and coordinated maneuvers that required split-second timing across vast distances. Most importantly, they fought with the absolute conviction that victory was not just possible but inevitable. The Devourer fleet, despite overwhelming numerical superiority and advanced technology, found themselves facing an enemy that simply refused to acknowledge that they should lose. When the last enemy vessel was destroyed, Admiral Morrison opened a channel to the entire human fleet. All units, this is Admiral Morrison. Mission complete. The Devourer threat has been permanently eliminated. The communication channels erupted with cheers, laughter, and what I was beginning to recognize as human victory celebrations. "Admiral," I said quietly, "your casualties, surprisingly light." "We lost maybe 200 ships total." I stared at him in amazement. "Out of 3,000 ships, against 50,000 enemies, you lost only 200? Korath. When you spend years fighting nightmares in impossible conditions, conventional enemies start to seem manageable." 6 months later, I stood once again in the Galactic Unity Council chamber, but everything had changed. The massive holographic display now showed human ships patrolling the Outer Rim systems, protecting galactic civilization from threats that emerged from the unknown regions of space. The Council had officially invited humanity to rejoin the galactic community, this time as full partners rather than unwelcome guests. "Advisor Korath," High Chancellor Keck 7 called from her position at the center of the chamber. "Do you have an update on the joint defense initiatives?" "Yes, Chancellor. The Human Free Fleet has established permanent patrol routes throughout Council space. They have also agreed to provide training programs for our military forces in what they call adaptive combat doctrine, and the cleanup of the former leadership." That was a more pleasant topic. Mex Prime and her collaborators had been tried for treason and sentenced to life imprisonment on a penal colony in the Outer Rim. Justice had been served, though it could never bring back the millions who had died during the invasion. The last of the traitors have been apprehended. The security review of all Council personnel is complete. Chancellor Cox 7 nodded approvingly. "Excellent. And Admiral Morrison's request for expanded exploration rights in the Unmarked Zone? Approved unanimously. The humans have agreed to share any significant discoveries with the Council, and in return we are providing them with updated stellar navigation data and research support." It was an arrangement that satisfied everyone. The humans got to continue exploring dangerous regions of space and fighting impossible odds, which made them happy. The galactic community got protection from threats they could not handle alone, which made them safe. "Is there anything else to discuss?" the Chancellor asked. "Actually, yes. Admiral Morrison has submitted a proposal for a joint training exercise. He suggests that our finest military officers spend time aboard human vessels to learn their tactical methods firsthand." The chamber fell silent. "He wants us to go into the Unmarked Zone with them?" Ambassador Turn 6 asked nervously. "For educational purposes only," I assured him. "The humans have guaranteed our safety. And you trust their definition of safety?" General Cox 2 asked. I thought about everything I had learned about human nature over the past months. General human safety standards are significantly different from ours. However, their survival rate is remarkably high for a species that actively seeks out mortal danger. "I volunteer," came a voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to see Captain Rex 2 standing, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber lights in rainbow patterns. "Captain?" the Chancellor asked. "I want to learn how they really fight. The battle simulations are helpful, but I want to experience actual human combat doctrine in real conditions." Within minutes, half the military officers in the chamber had volunteered for what was arguably the most dangerous training program in galactic history. "Very well," Chancellor Keck 7 decided. "Advisor Korath, please coordinate with Admiral Morrison to arrange the exchange program." As the council session ended and representatives filed out, I remained behind to update my personal logs. Entry 743. It has been 6 months since the Battle of the Void ended the Devourer threat, The galaxy is more peaceful than it has been in centuries, largely because everyone knows that somewhere in the darkness between stars 3,000 human ships are patrolling for threats and genuinely hoping to find something interesting to fight. I have learned many things about human nature during this crisis. They are violent, unpredictable, and absolutely incapable of backing down from a challenge. They make decisions based on emotion rather than logic, take risks that would terrify any rational being, and approach warfare as if it were some kind of competitive sport. They are also loyal, brave, and utterly committed to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Most importantly, I have learned that when the galaxy faces extinction, there is no one you would rather have on your side than a species of madmen who consider impossible odds to be an invitation to have fun. The humans are back, and the galaxy is safer for it. Even if the rest of us still have no idea how they managed to survive their own tactical doctrine. End of log. Admiral Morrison found me an hour later, sitting in my office and staring out at the stars. "Korath," he said, settling into his usual chair, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For trusting us. For believing that we would come back. For giving us a chance to be heroes instead of outcasts." I turned to face him. "Admiral, you saved our entire civilization. I should be thanking you." "Maybe. But you did something more important. You reminded us why we became soldiers in the first place." Morrison stood and extended his hand. "Partner?" I clasped his hand firmly. "Partner." As Admiral Morrison left my office, I returned to watching the stars. Somewhere out there, human patrol ships were hunting for threats that might endanger the galaxy. They would find them, fight them, and probably enjoy every minute of it. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it was oddly comforting. After all, in a universe full of hostile aliens, sentient disasters, and cosmic nightmares, it was good to know that somewhere in the darkness, the most dangerous predators in the galaxy were on our side. And they were human.